This is your before and after story. Instead of imagining a rewarding career in medical imaging, Southeastern College can actually take you there. Prepare for a career in ultrasound, radiology, and X-ray technology with hands-on specialized training, simulations, and real-life experience with the latest imaging technology. You'll be ready to play a vital role on any healthcare team. Transform your life by helping others. Southeastern College. Your future is bright. Visit scc.edu to get started.
Rise up! Team Red! Rise up! Team Red!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up Secret podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the USA Today NFL Wire site that, of course, covers your Arizona Cardinals, and we're in the opponent series, the opponent preview series that we do every summer for the past few years. I'm not going to tell you what episode number it is because I don't know what episode number it will end up being as I'm recording a bunch of shows with my colleagues across the NFL Wire, and this show is about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, whom the Arizona Cardinals will play on the road this coming season in December. I believe it will be in week 13, I think is that week that the Cardinals have. I should have checked that before. But joining me on the show, as he did a year ago, to talk about the Minnesota Vikings is Andrew Harbaugh, because Andrew has a lot of hats. So you're still doing the Vikings and doing Bucs now too. You jumped onto the Bucs at the beginning of last year.
I am, yeah. I'm selling my soul to the highest bidder at this point, and the NFL has a lot of money to throw around, so I'm splitting myself between the NFC North and South. So I'm right in the middle of the civil war between the two, I guess.
Well, no problem. So let's talk Buccaneers, a team that I envy in recent years. They've been to the playoffs 5 straight years. They've won 4 straight division titles. They won a Super Bowl with Tom Brady. Last year, they went 10-7, but lost in the first round of the playoffs. What was last year? Was last year viewed? Was it a success, a disappointment? Was it more or less did they meet expectations?
I would say it really was a roller coaster because, and it's funny, I'll highlight this. It's funny going from, I was covering the Vikings still, like I said, and that team crash and burn. J.J. McCarthy goes down with that knee injury, and Sam Darnold's your quarterback, and you're like, my God, our world's ending. And the Bucs had high expectations the whole time because you have Baker Mayfield, you got Mike Evans, you got Chris Godwin. Defense is still loaded. You got Antoine Winfield Jr., you got Levante David, Kalijah Kancey's coming into his own his second year, Yaya Diaby, so on and so forth. And really the team that dealt with more chaos was the Bucs, which when you told me that the team quarterbacked by Sam Darnold versus the team quarterbacked by Baker Mayfield and had all these all pros would be the one with the issues, I wouldn't have believed you. But they had injury bugs all year. Nobody could really get consistent play on defense. Offense really bailed them out of a lot of games. There was at one point they were leading the NFC South. Then in the middle of the year, when Godwin and Evans were both out for a while and Cade Otton had to be the number one receiving option for the team, in the middle of the year, offense was really struggling. They went down and Falcons retook the lead. Lost to the Falcons both times and still ended up winning the division because the Falcons collapsed at the end of the year thanks to some help from the Commanders. So they really, I think crawling into the playoffs is too generous of a term. I would say if it was a WWE stretcher match, somebody pushed them over the finish line while they laid there after being pummeled for 30 minutes. And it was one of those things where in the playoff game against the Commanders, you kind of thought maybe it's a young Commanders team. They're not used to the playoffs. Obviously, that Commanders team went to the NFC title game and surprised a lot of people. But yeah, I would say it's one of those things where at the time people are like, okay, we're going to count our blessings. But now you've won the division 4 straight times. Todd Bowles has won it 3 straight times. And then ironically, this morning he signs an extension. And despite that, I would still say he's still on the hot seat. So this roster is still very well built. And expectations are much higher going into 2025 than we were 2024. But yeah, injury bug just bit them time and again, and they never really got to build momentum at any point in 2024.
Well, and I'm looking here at their 2024 results, and they were coming out of the bye. They had one of the easiest schedules that they should have had. Giants, Panthers, Raiders, Cowboys, Panthers, Saints. You had the Chargers in there too, and the one game that they lost, as they won 6 of the last 7, was against the Cowboys.
Yes.
But so you had the Saints, which were a dumpster fire, the Panthers, who were and offensively it looked like it. Well, they scored 30, 26, 28, 40, 24, 48, 27. I will say this: I'm a huge Baker Mayfield fan. He really has turned into one very exciting quarterback, but he's also, isn't he, in a way, for the Vikings hat, a little bit Sam Darnold-y with the way because he has to throw the ball so much. He led the NFL in interceptions. Now, he's not Jameis Winston.
No.
So he's not a 30-30 guy, but he still threw 16 interceptions. But I guess 16 is a lot leading the NFL, but when you throw 41 touchdown passes, I guess you kind of get a pass on that. It's different than a 30-30 guy.
I think the way the Bucs are kind of built, I had this conversation with a buddy of mine, and I said, tell me if I'm wrong. I said, and I've made this comp for a while, and it's a little tongue-in-cheek considering what's happened in recent years. I said, and I've said this from the beginning, all the way back to when he got drafted and he recreated the photo, Baker Mayfield was destined to have the NFL career of Brett Favre, where just plays with reckless abandon whether he's running or throwing the ball. Like if you watch anything, like the college Baker comes out of him when he's running. Like he's just asking you to hit him and get a 15-yard penalty. And then when you don't, he'll get up, point ahead, drop the ball. Like he's just antagonizing you for the next time to do it. And they've talked about that this offseason, that Josh Grizzard, the new offensive coordinator, for the third season in a row, wants Baker to protect himself a little bit more. But that being said, like talking about the turnovers, that's also a Brett Favre factor, and that was an issue for a long time. And with those Packers teams, Favre kind of was able to get into that winning mentality when they added Reggie White to the team, and they got that defense to kind of back up that offense for a while. And I think the way the Bucs team's built now, once the defense is able to make him not have to score 40 points a game, 30 points a game like they've had to this year, I think that's when the turnovers will come down. There's some people on Bucs social media that are still not very happy with him. I will say, as a personal Browns fan, I would give my lung, one of my kidneys, and either of my thumbs to have him back.
To have this version of Baker Mayfield back in Cleveland.
I would even take the previous version we had. But that being said, it's one of those things where, like, he has proven he's in that. I think he's a top 10 quarterback. Turnovers obviously have to go down, but I think that's one of those things where once he has to quit playing hero ball, those are going to come down on their own.
Yeah.
So I think once the defense is healthy, and obviously you can't control that if you're him or anyone on the team for that matter. Jason Light's done a fantastic job building this roster and really retooling this defense this year and kind of trying to get some depth and trying to fix those things where you don't have to worry about the injury bug. I think once the defense is better, it'll protect Baker from having to make those kamikaze type plays, both with his legs and his arm, to try to win the game, so to speak.
So let's move on to the offseason talking. Now, obviously, the news hit this morning that Jason Light and Todd Bowles, both who have Arizona Cardinals connection, as Bowles was the DC
Yep.
here when Bruce Arians was here to start, and Jason Light was assistant GM way back in the day. He's off having success, and Steve Kimes, working for now part of an agency now. So things have gone very two different directions. So in free agency, we'll talk free agency first. They made sure to bring back Chris Godwin, a guard, Brent Breedson, Levante David for another year, Anthony Nelson, Greg Gaines. They brought back backup quarterback Kyle Trask. Were Godwin and David the two big names that you needed to get back into the locker room?
Yeah, and I think David was always a shoo-in. Like, I don't think he was ever in jeopardy to go anywhere else, because I think for him to go somewhere else, someone would really have had to overpay. And I think I think he's going to be a 35-year-old linebacker. It's kind of hard to convince a team to do that. And if you're looking at Godwin, he definitely, community-wise, like when he went down with his dislocated ankle on that Monday night, I want to say it was either during that week or the week after, he had a charity event for his organization, and he rolled himself in there with a scooter, a cast the size of Montana, and he didn't miss it for the Tampa Bay community. So it was one of those things where both him and Mike Evans are very entrenched there. And Jason Light talked about that, where they have to really make sure they bring those types of building block type players back. And Godwin had more money elsewhere. He's been very open about that. Jason Light has talked about that. So for Godwin to come back kind of speaks about the community they've built, the chemistry that locker room has. And I think that's something the Bucs, again, are really betting on carrying them a little bit more, both on offense and defense, getting leaders on both sides of the ball back.
Were any of their losses in free agency impact? They lost center Robert Hainsey to the Jaguars, edge rusher Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, although I'm very aware he was a bit of a disappointment as a first-round pick. Tavier Thomas and KJ Britt and Justin School. Any of those losses notable from last year?
I would say Joe Tryon-Shoyinka would be the biggest one, but even then, they replaced him very well in free agency and in the draft, where he was just kind of becoming more of a rotation guy. He like you said, he didn't really pan out. And that's one thing that's so funny for Jason Light, who's had so many draft hits later on. Like when he started at Tampa Bay, you look at some of those classes and you're like, how did he keep his job? And you look at kind of the heater he's on. I wrote this week, if he was in Vegas, he'd be kicked out of all the casinos at this point, because he's just been able to not miss in recent years. And he's been one of those misses, but really it's just been edge rushers he's not been able to nail on. And while I said, like, some of those guys they lost, I would say on defense, like, that would be the biggest one. I would say on offense, ironically, Justin School, who was one of their swing tackles, was really a depth piece. He went to the Vikings, ironically, so I still get to cover him. And fans are already calling him Justin Skoll because the name is
it's perfect. It is perfect.
And so I would say that would be arguably a bigger miss, but I would say the defensive rotation on pass rushers, just because that's been a continued issue, I would say that's the bigger miss. But nobody's been glaring in terms of this position's really going to suffer as a result.
And you add in free agency Hassan Reddick, again, another Cardinals connection. Todd Bowles never coached him, but Todd Bowles plus Hassan Reddick should be a good match, assuming Reddick didn't lose that. Like what I was always worried about as a Cardinals fan and covering the Cardinals with Hassan. There's a lot to be said about what happened in Arizona. That was his 2020 season was fantastic and out of nowhere, and the continued production that he had when he signed that 3-year deal with the Eagles. I said, "Oh, that's perfect. That's a perfect amount because he's going to hit 30 years old." And after that, his skill set is that elite first step off the ball. And because he doesn't have the size, his production would probably at some point take a dive. Last year it did, but last year he messed himself up with that holdout and the trade and then made no impact. If anyone can get that out of him, it's going to be Todd Bowles. What are sort of the expectations for him coming into 2025?
Yeah, I mean, he signed a 1-year deal for $14 million. So, like, honestly, it was more money than I thought maybe he would have got coming off that year he had with everything. Everyone was panicking he wasn't there for OTAs, which plenty of players miss OTAs, and it's nothing necessarily I was worried about covering the team, and honestly, a lot of people who actually covered the team weren't worried about. The fans were, because they were like, oh my God, here we go again. This is everything that the Eagles dealt with. But he was there right away for mandatory minicamp, and he said he's staying in Tampa now, all the way getting ready for training camp. I think he said he was working with Diaby, who Diaby's also said he's very excited to work with Reddick, and they both said they're kind of holding each other accountable because they're going to be working opposite each other. And kind of going back to the David signing, I think, again, you talked about Bowles being perfect for Reddick. I think that locker room itself, like, David's not going to let anything go by the wayside. Winfield, for being as young as he is, being an all-pro, is already, and his dad being obviously one of the better defensive backs of the last quarter century, knows what it takes. And there's just enough good veteran, a mix of veteran pieces with younger players to kind of keep him being like, okay, I've got to compete here, but I'm also going to get held accountable as well by the veterans. So I think out of everywhere he could have gone to kind of have a prove it deal, I think Tampa was one of maybe 3 spots that were perfect for him. I don't see it being a long-term fit, which I think the Bucs are fine with. I think they know they're in a Super Bowl window, and they're just looking to see what they can get out of him, which is totally fine. But I think if they can get 7-8 sacks out of him, they'll be happier than a pig and you know what. So they're really more so, I think, trying to see what he can create in terms of opportunities for Yaya Diaby, as well as Kalijah Cansey in the middle, where they've kind of started to create more interior pass rush as well. So no, I thought it was a very fun signing. Initially, I was like, oh no, this is going to be bad. But then no, the more I've heard them talk about each other, and Reddick gave some quotes and spoke to the media and was very honest about everything. And I can already tell it's going to be, I think, a good thing that he's in Tampa.
Any other player that they added that should make some, like, they have a new punter, how much that's going to impact things, but is there any other of their signings that should make an impact on the field, on the offense or defense?
I think Anthony Walker Jr., they signed, it was a linebacker depth piece. Linebacker behind David's been a real issue. Servoci Dennis was injured last year with a shoulder injury. Young guy out of Pitt a couple years ago. The expectations are there that he can maybe take over for David as soon as next year, if this is his last ride in the NFL in general. But I think they signed him as a piece to kind of push Dennis. So I like that they kind of threw a veteran behind him on the depth chart to kind of push him. So while it's not going to be one that people talk about a lot, I like that they kind of put what they hope to be the diamond and Dennis behind or between 2 pressure pieces and 2 good veteran leadership linebackers. So nothing too crazy. Jason Light kind of really focused on the draft this offseason, but I think the free agency, there was enough quiet, subtle moves where he knew he didn't want to tinker with chemistry too much compared to previous years. I mean, for the man who went after Gronk, Leonard Fournette, Tom Brady in one offseason, pretty quiet for him.
Yeah.
But no, I think he knows the roster didn't need too much, so he didn't add too many extra spices to the stew, so to speak.
Coming up next on the Rise of Secret podcast, Best of Cardinals talk on the web. Let's move on to talk about the Bucs in the draft. That's coming next on Rise of Secret. We're back on the Rise of Secret podcast, Best of Cardinals talk on the web. Moving on to talk about the NFL draft in 2025 and what the Bucs did. Let's take a look at their draft class. It starts off with round 1, where they get younger at receiver. They get dynamic, and they go to the well of Ohio State, which is wide receiver Emeka Egbuka in the first round, round 2, long athletic cornerback out of Notre Dame, played high school here in Phoenix. Benjamin Morrison in round 2, Jacob Parrish, cornerback out of K-State, round 3, going to edge David Walker out of Central Arkansas in round 4, going with another edge, Elijah Roberts out of out of SMU, round 5, and then round 7 getting the slot receiver out of Oregon, Tez Johnson, little guy, in round 7. What did you think of the Bucs draft, starting off with Egbuka to start it off in round 1?
I liked that it was the first shocker of the night, because really the draft I thought was pretty going the pace everybody thought. And then you hear wide receiver with the Tampa Bay pick, and I'm like, okay, what is happening? And then it's Emeka Egbuka, because I mean, Matthew Golden was still there, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're going to go that route because you don't have a speedster between Evans and Godwin. But I was like, okay, that was where I immediately went. But then they went with Egbuka, who's much more of the, I'm going to cross you over and make you fall down and just route run you to hell, and then get open that way. But no, I think it's one of those things where, and somebody pointed it out, and I apologize for not remembering who it was right after the draft, was Jason Light has always made it a point to be prepared for when guys are starting to get older. And Godwin coming off a season-ending injury, especially with an ankle. He's going to be entering his 30s. Mike Evans is getting up there as well, going into a contract year, not hinting that he's going to be going anywhere. He's another one of those guys where I think he's a Buck for life, and nothing's ever going to change that. But they got Jalen McMillan last year, who ended the season with 5 straight games with a touchdown. You add Egbuka, you kind of got your McMillan Godwin 2.0, or your Evans Godwin 2.0 between those two. And I think that's kind of where their mindset's at. So, but again, also kind of what we talked about at the beginning, defense starts to fall apart and you need to score 40 points a game. It helps if you're 4 deep at wide receiver and you got to have an arms race. So I think that's also part of the thinking where, and again, Jason Light has no problem going best player available in the draft. And I think that's definitely where the pick was with that.
And I thought, like, when I did my mock draft, I had them going edge, but with Yaya and then adding Reddick, like, they still addressed the edge twice. But I thought that Egbuka made a lot of sense, considering the wide receiver core that they've had for a while. You've got to have some sort of succession plan, is generally how that would go. And so it made sense. Morrison, how is he health-wise? Because he entered the offseason dealing with an injury that's otherwise, had it not been for that injury, he probably would have been a first-round pick, because he's got size, he's got speed, and he's got playmaking skills for sure.
Yeah, a lot of the cornerbacks who were hurt really fell. Obviously, your Cardinals benefited from that with Will Johnson falling to them. Another guy who would have been easily, I think, a top 10 pick based on what you saw on film. But yeah, Morrison didn't do anything in minicamp. I think they're taking it easy with his hip injury, as you would with anything. I think getting him at 53 is a nice little gamble where if he pans out, great. If not, I don't think it's going to be anything where anyone's going to hold Jason Light and burn him in effigy or anything like that. But it's one of those things where the cornerback position is one of the, it's one of the weaker spots on the Bucs roster right now, where they just can't get consistent play. And I think it's one of those things where Morrison's a Powerball ticket for them, where you might get a couple bucks off of it, or you might just strike big and win the whole thing. And if you do, obviously you get one of your starting outside cornerbacks for the foreseeable future. But if not, I think you got a rotational guy at worst. So, and I think that's one of those things where I think the Parrish pick, ironically, is going to be the bigger payoff right away, because in minicamp, they were already having Parrish talking about starting or competing for the starting nickel job. So, which I thought was very interesting coming out of things, considering all the Bucs were reporting for minicamp. So, if he was already doing that with returning starters being there, I thought that was interesting as well. So, definitely the secondary needed some help. And Morrison, like I said, I think is going to be brought along, obviously, during training camp. I don't know if they'll see him during preseason games. I would like to think you do, but I think Parrish is going to be the one that people talk about more as the training camp and preseason rolls along compared to Morrison.
When we get to the day 3 picks, do you expect any of those guys, Walker, Roberts, Tez Johnson, do you expect any of them to have any sort of impact as rookies this coming season?
I would say Walker and Johnson have the best shot. Roberts is actually, he's a little bit undersized. They're moving him inside to be a rotation guy with Vea, Cansey, competing with the Mount Everest that is Desmond Watson as well. But Walker, Jason Lights had a really good track record with hitting on FCS players. And David Walker is a really toolsy edge guy. And I think putting him behind Reddick and Diaby for a year and letting him develop, I think that's also something where if Reddick leaves after a year, I think Walker could start next year in his place, and they're more than happy with that. So that's a nice long-term play. Johnson, though, I think is going to be their main return guy, both in the punt and kick return game, because last year that guy was Bucky Irving, and Bucky Irving emerged down the stretch as going to be the starting running back guy, ironically, who was Johnson's teammate at Oregon, and who both of them have been hysterical to listen to. If anybody feels like listening to Bucs media clips and them talking about each other, it's hilarious. But Tez Johnson, I think, is going to be very interesting in the return game. So obviously the kick returns are very hit and miss in today's NFL, but punt returns, I think Johnson could be interesting. So nothing huge impact wise on either front, but I think you might get a spot play here or two from those two.
And well, interestingly enough about the kickoffs is that Cardinals special teams coach Jeff Rogers, when they changed the touchback rule, he thinks the return rate's it went from 20 to about 30% last year. He thinks it's going to jump all the way to about 70%. So the kickoff game is going to be big, I think, this year.
Yay. Right?
No, I mean it goes from like when they put it, because it was originally supposed to be the 35, and then the coaches the owners we'll just put it at the 30, and then teams were still banging out of the back of the end zone. Yeah. But at the 35, that's a short field. So
yeah, that's gonna be tough.
That'll be fun. Coming up next on the Rise of Secret podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. Let's move on and talk about the expectations for 2025. They're big ones in Tampa. That's coming on next on Rise of Secret. We're back on the Rise of Secret podcast. Best of Cardinals talk on the web, talking to Andrew Harbaugh from Buc Wire about the 2025 Bucs. We've looked at their offseason and their draft. So they've been to the playoffs 5 straight years. They've won 4 straight division titles. What is Bucs Nation expecting from this team this year?
I think if they don't win at least one playoff game, it may be even 2, which means they would make an NFC title game appearance. I think despite signing an extension this morning, I think Todd Bowles is very much on the hot seat and could be replaced. Now, I'm not saying if anybody listening is Mike Florio reader or not, he continues to float the idea that Bill Belichick's going to replace Todd Bowles. I don't think anything crazy like that's going to happen, but it's one of those things where we've seen it before where you can win consistently, but if you're not winning the bigger games, you can find your way looking for a job. I mean, that's how Andy Reid ended up in Kansas City despite being in Philadelphia and winning as much as he did. And same thing could be said here with Todd Bowles. I like Todd Bowles. I know Bucs fans are very torn on him. Media likes him a lot. He's very friendly with them and does a lot of good stuff in terms of being open and discussing everything at length and being, I think, much more talkative than most head coaches are nowadays.
Oh my goodness, yes. And granted, he's a Bruce Arians guy, and Bruce Arians loved. You guys know, Bruce Arians loves to hear himself talk. You can't believe a lot of what he says,
right?
But he will give you sound bites.
Yes, and Bowles always has this little corner grin, and when you watch him, you again tongue in cheek, kind of where you don't know what to believe, but again. this roster, like, offense is loaded. You've got 4 deep at wide receiver. You've got 2 deep at running back. You got Baker Mayfield. You've got 2 bookend tackles. One of them is the only person to be an all-pro at both left and right tackle in Tristan Wirfs. You've got a first-round pick at center who's playing really well, and Graham Barton. Defense, we've gone over all of it again. And you've got an all-pro at middle linebacker. You've got an all-pro at safety. I mean,
you got Vita Vea. You've got that. Yeah, you've got guys.
You're loaded. And it's one of those things where you have to win with this team. And it's one of those things where, again, if you look at the regular season schedule, like you talked about after their bye, they had that really soft schedule. Well, before they had that, they had wins over the Lions on the road. They beat the Commanders in week 1, albeit Jaden Daniels was kind of finding his footing. And they beat the Eagles, who won the Super Bowl last year, 33-16. So they can beat good teams. It's just one of those things where they just fell apart down the stretch due to injury and so on and so forth. And the inconsistencies happen. So like you talked about that stretch after the bye. Before going into the bye, they were on a 4-game losing streak. And that's where, again, that kind of falls on the Bulls, where I remember writing, like, I wasn't sure he would make it out of the bye week. Like, you go into that and it would have been, 4-6, if I think I remember. And that roster was too good to be that at that point. Even if you're playing Baltimore, Kansas City, San Francisco, when you're beating the Eagles, the Lions, Commanders, stuff like that, you need to be doing better. And I think the early playoff exits, despite winning the division, you're winning arguably the worst division in football. So it's like,
gotta love the NFC South. That's how Ron Rivera lasted so long at Carolina.
Yeah, it's like when Gonzaga is the number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament for as long as it was, and they were winning the WAC or whatever it was they were in for basketball, and they were getting the early knockout of the tournament, is because they weren't playing anybody good most of the time. And I think Tampa Bay at this point has proven to be the Gonzaga of the NFC South at this point. They've won it 4 straight times, and eventually Gonzaga won a national title. And I think it's one of those things where they've got to put it together. I don't know what's got to click. It's got to be a combination of coaching, health, and just a little bit of luck, obviously, sprinkled in. That's how the NFL works. But Bowles is definitely on the hot seat, and I think an extension makes it even more so after this morning.
They're gonna like. I don't wish 2022 Cardinals on you, but doesn't this feel like the 2022 extensions that the Cardinals gave GM Steve Keim and Cliff Kingsbury after they went to the playoffs? Like, they had it was different though. They started off 9-1, so they made the playoffs. Year 1 bad, year 2 near the playoffs, year 3 made the playoffs but had a collapse. And they give Keim and Kingsbury that extension. They give Kyler his contract, and then 2022 was abysmal. And before the extensions even start, they fired Kingsbury, and it made him look awful. But at least what you have going on here in Tampa right now is a 5-year run where they're making the playoffs. You've got Bulls taking to the postseason 3 straight years. And honestly, Tampa should be seen as the clear favorite in that division because you've got a dumpster fire in the Saints.
Yep.
You've got major question mark. You can say the Panthers are ascending, but you can't expect from much. And then Atlanta's Atlanta. Like,
yeah, you don't know what Michael Penix is going to do.
They are going to be middling. They're going to win 8 or 9 games, and that's just all the Falcons are going to do because Falcons are going to Falcons their life, and that's just how the NFC South goes. So, but yeah, so it comes down to playoff win or bust. Is that or is the Tampa fan base such that they can weather another, that they'll be unhappy, but be content with the fact that you've got a playoff team every year, or is this the year that things get greedy?
I would say, and it's funny because I think when other teams are winning around you, it makes a difference, and I think when other teams are losing around you, it makes a difference because, like, when other teams are losing around you and you're the one good team, pressure's added. And when other teams are winning around you and you're the one team that's not winning, pressure's added. So I know it's not directly related, and this probably puts more pressure on the Dolphins, but Florida Panthers have won 2 straight Stanley Cups. The Lightning had a run where they were winning Stanley Cups nonstop. The Rays are a dumpster fire of a baseball team right now, and they don't even have a stadium. They're playing at the Yankees minor league stadium. And it's one of those things where the Bucs are really what they've got at this point. And Florida State, if you want to go up the road to Tallahassee a little bit, if anybody who's listening to this, the face Jess made just explained the state of Florida State football, where it's just a wincing face. And nothing can be as great as Florida Gators and DJ Lagway. There's no fandom speaking that at all. But the point stands that there's a perfect mix of where they're one of the teams you could be optimistic about right now in terms of Florida football. And I think it's one of those things where you're going to be happy to make the playoffs, but then when you lose in that first round to, it could be the Cardinals, it could be the Commanders again.
I'll be happy with that. Come on, Cardinals.
Well, right, exactly.
The playoffs
Will be, but it's one of those things where, and maybe it's the Cowboys, God forbid, but it's one of those things where you lose in the first round again. I think the stuff starts to hit the fan, whether win or lose. It's one of those things where something's got to give. And I think it's one of those things like you talked about just real quick with the Kingsbury and Kime extensions, like they both were gone in that instance. Jason Light's not going anywhere. He's won a Super Bowl. He's shown he'll be aggressive and make the moves and try to build a winning roster. And he's built a winning roster. Like the old Bill Parcells thing, if you're going to let me cook, you might as well let me buy the groceries. No, we went to Erdogan and we went to Whole Foods and we gave you the best groceries imaginable. And we took you to Gordon Ramsay's kitchen and the souffle collapsed and the steak's raw and where's the cream sauce and everything that Gordon's yelling at you. Like the ingredients are there. It's now time for you to make a 3-course meal, Todd Bowles.
Sounds good. So how do Bucs fans view the matchup against the Cardinals? I'm not talking about prediction, but do they see it's week 13, so it's November 30th, not quite December, so it's November 30th in Tampa, that week 13 game, and it's coming off a stretch where you play the Bills and the Rams on the road, and you come home to play the Cardinals. How are the Cardinals viewed out there by Bucs fans? Is it a game where they're like, yeah, that's a win, or that's okay, that's one of our I don't know type games?
That's the stretch of the season where you talked about the Rams and the Bills, where it's like, this is gonna suck. Like if you're in the like analyzing the schedule, this is gonna be the rough part. Not like last year where you had this like pillow schedule to end the year where you're like, okay, we're gonna be able to bounce our way through. I think anytime you have a big long road trip, especially going from Los Angeles cross country to Buffalo and then heading back down south, like you're going all over the country at that point. I think the only thing that in terms of energy that might help is the Ring of Honor game for Simeon Rice.
Right.
So maybe there's a little bit more energy. I mean, you're going to have obviously a full stadium no matter what, but I think you're going to have a little bit more energy because of that. For better or worse, John Gruden's back in the Ring of Honor as well, so I think he'll be there, and that always brings out fans and energy whenever he's in the arena or in the stadium. He's been all over Buck Social as well, so I think that's something where for any time in football you look for something to cling to kind of give you a little bit of an edge. Maybe the Ring of Honor aspect of it is that, but the Cardinals, I think they've gone from being a trap game to very much being, okay, this is a good football team, a well-coached football team. And just because you're going off of the Rams and Bills, you can't be like, oh, thank God it's the Cardinals. No, it's like, okay, we're not done yet. We got the Cardinals to go through, and then we make it to December. So it's going to be a tough matchup.
Simeon Rice, drafted by the Cardinals, and before he left, he called the Cardinals the armpit of the NFL, which warms our that makes us feel so happy towards him. No, that he went on and had a fantastic career, but Rice was what a lot of great pass rushers, he cared about sacks, and that was about it. But luckily, he got a lot of them. He got a lot of them, and he was really, really good. Awesome. Well, Andrew, I appreciate the time that you took to join me again this year. Albeit we're in the different hat this time. You can find Andrew's work both on Vikings Wire and Bucs Wire and on social media. Andrew, I don't remember. Are you one who is on or not on social media?
I am, for better or worse. Again, just to keep using that phrase anymore. You can find me on Twitter at MandrewNFL. Really, for the most part, going through summer scouting and stuff, sharing some Buck stuff on there as well. So if you enjoy college football right now, that's most of what my feed is. So if you want me hyping up your Sam Levitt, your Jordan Tysons of the world, I'm all on board of that, just as a cheap plug.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm excited for Arizona State this year. Am I? Like, last year was magical. I don't like, if they can, as long as they're in the mix for that Big 12 title, I want to see them win the Big 12, but I'm not going to expect them to, and I'm not going to expect them to go to the college football playoff. Last year was magic. It was magic. I bet I'm excited for this year. I'm a season ticket holder. I've been going to ASU games since 2007. So,
This is what you're saying.
Oh my gosh, last year was so wonderful. After the dumpster fire years, that was like, this year we went into, we're like, hey, maybe a bowl. If they make a bowl, this is a good year. And then they hit the bowl eligibility mid-year, and then they kept winning in Kansas kept helping us. They kept beating the teams that we needed them to beat, and then they lost to us. And so we're like, everything fell in line. Awesome. Well, thank you, Andrew, for your time. That'll wrap up this edition of the Rise Up Seared podcast. Best of Cardinals Talk on the web. We'll be back again with another one of our preview shows soon. Thanks for listening, as always.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms, so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red, See Red, and of course, Rise Up, See Red.